say that I had many mentors throughout our process, but the person that I think really influenced my career is Carly Fiorina. Any woman in technology would know who she is because she was the first CEO of Fortune 50 in the United States, female CEO.
Welcome to Tech Talent Today, where IT leaders share their tough challenges, creative solutions, and latest insights. You'll discover fresh ideas and inspiration here with your host, IT staffing veteran and president of Claremont Technologies, Jody Kulik-Mayer. And now, here's Jody.
Welcome to Tech Talent Today. I'm your host, Jody Kulik-Mayer. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Juliette W. Samson. Juliette is Chief Information Officer and Vice President of Supply Chain of a consumer packaged goods food and beverage company. She's responsible for implementing new technologies and optimizing the supply chain process to improve speed, service, and profitability. Juliette is a graduate of Cornell and Columbia Universities and speaks 4 languages. In addition to all of this, Juliette is a determined mom who left no stone unturned to help her beautiful daughter find a kidney. Welcome, Juliette. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Jody. Really appreciate the invite.
So let's jump right into it. I read in a Korn Ferry survey that only 18% of CIOs are women. And here you are, a CIO for 7 years. Was this a goal of yours? How did you come to your current position?
It's interesting, the statistics. I think the statistics is getting significantly better. But when I started out back in the 1980s, when I graduated, a lot less women were in these kinds of positions. And honestly, the title in general was not a goal of mine. So CIO was absolutely not a goal at that time. What was a goal for me really is to utilize the technology and enable overall the process to affect people around the world, to affect people's jobs in a positive way. I really understood why I wanted to be an engineer. And because of my interest, I was very specific on the industries and the roles that I have taken. Particularly, I wanted to make sure that the roles that I had were very impactful. Industries that I have are impactful around the world. And as we can continue our conversation, you will see that I specifically was very interested in working for companies that made an impact. And that's how I chose my first assignment, which was at AT&T.
Wow. Now, I recall that you were at AT&T for 20 years. Tell me how you navigated through the company and grew there.
So AT&T is a company, again, by design, and this is important to really understand sort of where your career should be going and what you want to do as a person. So my goal at the very beginning was join a company which is large so that you can kind of move around and really, really learn everything. And I started out in manufacturing, and then I moved into research and development, and then I moved into services, and then into strategy. So yeah, I spent a lot of time at AT&T, but at the same time, I had the opportunity to move around and really learn the business, and that is the way that I grew.
I think that is one of the benefits of a large company, that there's a lot of opportunities to try different things.
And that was the idea. You know, one of the very interesting experiences, and I think this is really important for anyone that's starting out, is to really understand the direction where you want to go. And it's a very hard thing to do. It's very funny. I actually remember one of my managers at AT&T, very beginning of my career. It was my first assignment, and like 6 months into it, he said to me, Juliette, as part of your development process and requirements, I'd like you to write down your career goals. And I was totally stunned. And I'm like, oh my God, what do you mean my career goals? I'm just starting and I'm really 6 months into this job. Like, I don't know. But I really took some time to think about it, and I was looking into what I want to do for the next 3 years, for the next 5 years. And every single 5 years, I have done that. And I sweat through that process, but it really, really helped me because I wrote down what I want to do. And at that point, I realized that I really wanted to be in a big company, really be able to move around, learn everything, because that's the way that I can grow. And that's the way that I can really understand what people are doing and lead an organization if I really know what they're doing. So that's really how I started.
I think that's wonderful because I find that a lot of people sort of float around and whatever happens to them, they navigate that way. So to have like a thought out path is helpful. They say that like you sort of need a map to where you're going to, because how are you going to know if you got there? So that's really lucky that you had a manager. Was he a mentor of yours?
Well, it's very interesting because I was one of 3 women graduates in the engineering class at Cornell. That was a class of 500. So it was very, very few. So when I joined Western Electric at the time, which was part of AT&T, was the manufacturing arm, this particular gentleman had me as a woman engineer for the very first time. And I guess they had meetings before, and they talked about how they have to embrace me and really help me. I wouldn't say he was a mentor, but he was very careful, and he was a very, very nice person. He worked in the Army before. And he really wanted to make sure that I'm comfortable and I can really perform. And yeah, I guess he was definitely helping me to navigate. I was working for him for the first 3 years or so. I was in Reading, Pennsylvania. And this was one of the assignments that he asked me in terms of my career. So it was interesting. I also had some very interesting experiences which sort of mesmerized me, because in the world that I came from in the past, women were not different than men. So as you know, I was born in Eastern Europe, in Romania, and although it was a communist country, there were lots and lots of women doctors and women physicists. In fact, my mother was a physicist, an experimental physicist. My father was also a physicist. And I didn't grow up thinking that women in science are unique or women in medicine are unique until really I came into this country where it was a novelty, and my own mother had a very difficult time finding a job because she was overqualified for everything she applied to. Ultimately, of course, she got a very good job as a biochemist. So the point is that for me, it was not unusual to be an engineer. But I was at Western Electric in manufacturing, and one of the guys, an older gentleman, asked me, "It's so nice to have you here, but tell me, why are you so interested in being an engineer? I mean, most women want to have a family and they want to get married and have children, and why don't you want to do that?" So I said to him, "That's a very fair question. So let me ask you a question. Why are you an engineer?" He said, "Well, I'm an engineer because I like it." And I said, "Well, guess what? Me too. So I'm going to try to have all those things, and we'll see how life develops." So I thought it was an interesting experience to share.
I agree. I think I sort of take for granted the trails women like you have blazed for women a little bit later than you coming down the pike. Like my mom said when she went to college, she felt like she had very few opportunities that she could be like a nurse, a teacher, or a wife. She chose to be a teacher, but she didn't feel like the world was open to her in the same way. And I think it's so interesting that in a communist country, the women had the same opportunities as men. So that is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, they did from a career perspective, absolutely. Of course, everywhere in the world, women just have to do more because they're the ones that carry the children. But I do feel, Jody, that today it's tremendously better. And it's attributed to many, many women, and it's attributed to many men because there's lots of people that embrace this and really support it. And I'm also a very big believer in really hiring the people that are most qualified. So I really am not ever looking for an easy way out just because I'm a woman or just because I am whatever. It really should be on merit, but people should be treated equally regardless of your religion, color, sex, any of that.
I agree. And I think the culture of a company is so important that all people could feel comfortable if they get a job there. Though that does make me think when you said you were back in college and there was only 3 women engineers that graduated with you, were you ever uncomfortable? Did you think about that at the time?
I did not. I always felt comfortable being with men and women. I made a special effort at Cornell, which is a very, very large school, to be able to make friends. And so I joined a sorority. This way I was able to have women friends. But I was always comfortable with men. It was never an issue for me, and I didn't think about it. I really thought about it more when people asked me the question, and then I reflect on it. But for me, it was not an issue. I was just a part of them. And I remember the very first, as you know, Cornell is a pretty difficult school. And I remember the president of the university basically said, at the very first day, they said, look to your right and look to your left. there is only 2 of 3 that will be graduating this class. And that was basically the dropout rate. So I was more focused on graduating than who's surrounding me. I really didn't feel different.
That's wonderful. Now, during your career, did you have a mentor?
Yeah, I think it's really important to find people that you look up to and that you can learn from. And I would say that I had many mentors throughout our process. Like I said, my very first boss, he was very nice and he really wanted to make me comfortable. But the person that I think really influenced my career is Carly Fiorina. Any woman in technology would know who she is because she was the first female CEO of Fortune 50 in United States. And that was when she was Packard. I was very fortunate to meet her and work for her at AT&T. I worked for her 3 years at AT&T, and then I worked for her while we spinned off Lucent. So I was part of that spin-off process. And I worked for her in a strategy role. And very interestingly, I never thought that I could do strategy. I thought strategy was an art rather than a science. And she was extremely encouraging, very supportive. Her quote was, "Empower yourself by acknowledging that we all have God-given strength, and a good leader unleashes them rather than squash them." And she was one of those, that she was a leader and she unleashed your capabilities. And she showed me that strategy, in fact, is very logical and it's very data-driven, and that I absolutely have a strategic mind. And so I was able, as a result of that, to switch from a true engineering job to one that's more strategic, that drives a business. And so I was definitely empowered by this and just watching her. So I feel she was a major influencer of my career in terms of where I want to go. And at that point, back in 1996, I realized that I can actually do more. I don't know if I still had a goal of being a CIO, but I absolutely had a goal in growing in the organization to have more and more of an impact. And that's exactly what has happened.
Do you find that experience help you find your own management style and how you want to mentor your team?
Absolutely. And I also want to say, as I said earlier, that Carly was not necessarily a believer in women per se. She was a believer in good performance. And that's why I really got along with her, because I was always a believer of the same. And she absolutely influenced how I manage. And really, you have to act what you say. If you just say all these beautiful things and you don't act it, then people will not follow. So, caring about your employees, empowering your employees, challenging them, giving them the things that they don't necessarily think they can do and letting them know that, yes, they can. All of those things are things that she has done that I actually believe in and follow as well. And honestly, another mentor in my life was my father and my mother. They also believed in the same thing, and they were always very encouraging and very supportive. It's very important to do the same to all your employees, especially younger people, because they're the ones that are really testing out the field. And so you want to expose them. You want to trust them. Trust is such an important part. And you do want to unleash their capabilities. So you have to push them in different directions.
That's true. A good manager is so important throughout the organization, but definitely your direct manager, because they say people don't leave companies, they leave managers. So it's really important to help your team, and which helps your company grow.
Yeah. And people not just leave, but they also join. People join companies due to their culture and due to the manager or the people that they speak with.
You're so right. And the IT hiring market these days is getting very hot and very competitive. It's really becoming a candidate market. So the direct hiring manager is key in winning the best staff.
Totally agree.
I know you're in AT&T for a while, and then you're able to move into the finance industry. And I'd love to hear about that, because a lot of people talk to me about how can they change industries, because companies are really looking often for people who have their industry experience. So how did you manage to change?
This was very interesting, again, in terms of what happened to me personally, but I'm trying to kind of draw parallels in terms of how things happen. So as I mentioned to you, I had a career goal. And even though you write down your goal, you can never get from point A to point B directly. there's always going to be curveballs that are being thrown at you. And the question is, how do you handle them? And so one of the curveballs which I had at AT&T is as I was growing and really being extremely successful, the industry self-shrunk. Carly, who was my mentor and I worked for towards the end of my career at AT&T, left to HP, asked me to come along. I did not want to move to California. In retrospect, that was actually a very good move. And I really had to think about, now I had 2 little children. Okay, what am I going to do? Continue in the telecom industry, which was shrinking, or do something that's more industry agnostic? So I did decide to go into IT, which I felt was a very close match to the telecom industry. And go into IT, which will then be industry agnostic because you could work for any company and support their IT. So honestly, I really started to look around and I was not focused on the financial industry or any specific industry. I was more focused in let me get an IT position and leave telecom. So I actually applied to a lot of different places, and a very nice gentleman from Bank of America that at that time was Merrill Lynch interviewed me and was very, very entrusted with the tenacity and the courage. And by the way, I didn't think I had any courage, but I guess I came across that I did have courage. And he asked me, how are you going to transition and how are you going to manage this transition like this, especially on Wall Street? And I said to him, listen, I've managed a lot of issues in my life, personal as well as on the business side. And there's nothing that I cannot do. So I will manage this as it comes to me and you have to give me a chance. And he did. And I went over to Merrill Lynch and I really enjoyed my assignment there. I did a lot of mergers and acquisitions, which was sort of new to me. I mean, I did a spin-off at AT&T. I did the Lucent spin-off from a technology perspective, but at Merrill Lynch, I did mostly mergers. So that was very interesting. And again, things happen for a reason. I was there for 1 year. But like I mentioned to you, I really feel like it's important to be in an industry that's very impactful to the world. I mean, at AT&T, I feel very, very fortunate because I was part of really connecting the world and laying down fiber optics for undersea cable communications. And I was part of that. And I was part of introducing wireless back in the early 1990s. I traveled the world. I really feel like I was part of a big mission. At Merrill Lynch, I learned other things. And so there's something good in everything that you do. And that's also a characteristic that I think is really important to look at what is really good about what you're doing so that you can really enjoy your function. So what happened is that the chief financial officer of Lucent moved over to Pfizer and asked me to join Pfizer and support their IT organization in their strategic goals. And so after 1 year at Merrill Lynch, I moved over to Pfizer. And again, here comes in play of how important it is to keep your network alive, never burn a bridge, always support people that you like, and always work up as well as down. And so I was really very happy that Frank D'Amelio, who's the Pfizer CFO today, asked me to join the company. So then I moved over into the pharmaceutical industry, which was another very fantastic experience for me.
Right. That is very impactful. And I think today, right, with the pandemic, really shows how impactful it is. Yeah.
But in general, drugs are really helping people stay alive. And Pfizer, it's an incredible company. It was at that time, it is today. Today, they have an incredible CEO. I'm reading all these articles about everything that he's doing and how he met President Biden just the other day and how he's going to be selling, I think, 500 million vaccines to third world countries to really help the pandemic. And Pfizer has done that all the time. They have sent drugs for very low cost to third world countries. And so it's a very nice cause. And I'm very proud and very, very happy that I got a chance to work there.
Right. Now, I know we talked about your career trajectory, but you mentioned you are also a mom and you were raising a family. So how were you able to balance your personal life and your career at the same time?
Again, none of this is a script and everything kind of happens and then you have to kind of deal with it. So I am very fortunate. I have 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, and it's really important to understand and to make sure that you have a support structure in place. And so fortunate, I have a husband who is an excellent father, and he also happened to have a job which was more flexible in terms of his time and also his location. So he was located very close to the home. And very early especially when we had children, we had to talk about a decision in terms of who's more career oriented, who really wants to do more career, more traveling versus maybe being closer to the home. And his personality is very family oriented. So he was close, and we decided that I will be pursuing the career and he will be doing the same, but he will be more around the house. In addition, we had to have a live-in. So we hired a live-in for 14 years. So that's not easy, but it was definitely helpful when you talk about your career. It was not so easy on the family because we were never alone. The house was always filled with this additional person. But it was extremely helpful for me because I knew that if I'm traveling internationally or domestically, or if I work late, or if I come home late, there's somebody at home with the children. There's cooking, there's cleaning, there's everything that's done. So I conscientiously built a support structure. Now, of course, there's a cost to that. So you have to evaluate what are your goals and what's important to you. And for me, both were important. But I was also very lucky, Jody, that I saw this at home with my mother. Because back in the old country, we had a live-in who took care of me as a child. And my mother had a career, and so did my father. So for me, this was not unusual. And my husband is also from the same place, same world. His mother was a teacher. So we were both raised in an environment where this was not unusual. So I knew that even though I was raised by a live-in, and my father, by the way, was around a lot because he was a teacher. So when you're a professor or a teacher, you have, again, very flexible hours. So my father was always around, and the live-in took care of the house. And so I kind of wanted to repeat the same model. And I was very fortunate that I was able to do that. And I had a husband that was supportive of that. So that's how I was able to focus on my career. And because I was focused and happy in my career, when I did have time, which I had plenty of time in the evenings and on the weekends, and I focused on the children. So the children really didn't miss having a mom.
It's good that you had a model to follow. That's how you were raised. So you've seen it successfully done somewhere else. Also fortunate that you could afford to proceed like that. So that's wonderful. Now, we discussed that at one point your daughter needed a kidney, and nothing can help with that. I think all hands on deck in that case. So tell me about that experience. Did you put your career on hold? How did you handle that?
So again, you have to believe in people. You have to believe in yourself. And you have to find strength within. And very interestingly, when life gives you a certain situation, you naturally handle it. And so it was a very rough time. Yes, my daughter, we don't know if she was born this way or it happened in very early in her life, but her kidney function deteriorated. And at the age of 14, she needed her first kidney transplant. She has 2. But at the age of 14, she needed her first. And so when we uncovered this very early when she was about 1 or 2, and she had a lot of issues. She was in intensive care for months. It was a very difficult time. It was very touch and go. I did not put my career on hold, but I was very lucky that I had an environment that was very supportive. I was working full time, but again, I had people at work, my secretary that was helping me drive my son to daycare. I had a live-in who was able to sit next to my daughter. My husband took some time off. I took vacation, and I took the time that I needed to be with her. I was really mostly involved in managing the doctors, managing the issues, more from a business perspective. Of course, I was next to my daughter, but it was hard for me to be next to her and not cry. And she would tell me at age of 3, Mom, if you're going to be next to me and cry, don't be here. It was very funny at that age for somebody that little to say something so profound. And I learned to be strong. So this experience made me even stronger. But I have to tell you that I was working throughout this process. And to be honest, the work kept me being able to do everything. Naturally, after 4 or 5 months, when things settled down, I got very tired. But I continued. I was able to sleep again and all of that. So I was very fortunate, I think, because of my drive and my strength and the people that were around me. Like I said, I had everybody helping me. I had friends of mine helping me. I had my secretary, who's a friend of mine today. And incidentally, everyone around me was very supportive. And, I was able to do this. I don't know what else to say other than you just have to have tenacity and belief. You have to truly believe believe in your personal life and believe in your career. If you believe, it will come. This is a motto that I truly, truly believe in. If you believe that you can move forward, you can handle this, you can do this, somehow your brain switches and you can do it.
You find a way, you're like open to opportunities, and then you seem to notice them, I think.
Yeah.
That's part of the mindset.
Right. You have to be open. You have to accept when it's offered to you. And somehow you get through it. And so with age, I've learned, obviously at that moment it was difficult, but later on I realized that things get resolved. You just have to take one step at a time. And this is a suggestion and this is an advice to everyone in every aspect of your life, personal or career, is take one step at a time. It's good to plan the future. And like I said to you, you cannot get from point A to point B in a straight line. There are curveballs that come, but when those things happen, you take one day at a time, one step at a time. And before you know it, you get through it. And then you can look back and say, hey, I did all this. And I don't know how I did it, but I did do it.
Right. That is great advice. Now, I understand that you developed a website to help find the kidney for your daughter.
Yes. So the first kidney she received from her father. And unfortunately, due to the drug therapy that they gave her at the time, while the drugs helped, they also killed her kidney eventually within 6 years. And so she had to look for a second, or we had to look for a second. And I was the next one on the list, if you will, and I was a match. But when they did an MRI, they found that I had a huge tumor on my kidney. So actually my daughter saved my life. And that tumor was removed and my kidney was removed. So I'm also a one kidney person, as is my husband now, as is my daughter. But unfortunately, we had to go and look for an altruistic donor. And that is not an easy thing to do. So we have actually wrote an article in the town of her college. She went to Lafayette. So we wrote an article in the Bethlehem Times about her need. I didn't build a website, but another friend of mine built a website, actually her son, who since has gone to MIT and has graduated from there, but he has built a website. Another friend of my husband's hosted the website, which today is still there. So there was no expense to host it. And we built it. We wrote essays. We did all kinds of things so that people could go to this website, and not just for Andrea, but also for anyone else. So there were many, many people that are in the same situation. And I basically tell them to go to the website and see how we built it so that they can build it in the same way. And we got very, very lucky that there were several people that were interested in donating, and then they had to go through the testing process. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think there were about 15 people, maybe more, that were tested, and 3 of them were matches. And they were very different age groups and sex. And the doctors have decided which one of the 3 would be the best solution for my daughter. And then she got another kidney transplant at age of 21. My daughter is now 26. Knock wood, she's doing very well. And they changed the drug therapy. So things kind of worked out. And I did all that, by the way, while I was working. It's interesting. As long as you're open and comfortable about your life and who you are, you get a lot of help. People are stepping up and they're helping. And that's the beauty of this country, I have to say. It's unbelievable, the amount of help between the doctors, between the hospitals. Typically, they don't test more than one person for a transplant. This particular hospital and this particular doctor was willing to work with 3 different people. And that was an increase in cost for them, and they were willing to do it. And again, it has to do with the relationships that you build with them. And so I had help from the hospital. I had a good insurance. I had great friends, college friends, and then there were some amazing altruistic people in this country that did this for nothing. And the woman who donated, she was an amazing person. This is something she wanted to do, and we became friends afterwards, and we were just very, very lucky.
The whole story is amazing. I want to post in the show notes your website and an article you gave, because maybe it could help somebody else who's on that journey and see a light at the end of the tunnel, how somebody worked through that successfully. And I think it could really help someone.
I agree, absolutely, because all the things that I did, I had to research and I connected with people that people helped and people knew about it. But I want to be able to help others as well. So I really appreciate that, Jody, if you could post that, because I think it will help a lot of different people. Absolutely.
It'll be in the show notes for people to access. Just to wrap up I'm wondering if you have advice for women in IT. I guess it doesn't even have to even be for women. It could be for anyone.
It's interesting. Everybody has a very different perspective, but there are some key things for me that were very helpful. One of them is always have a plan. It's important to know where you're going and why you're doing what you're doing. Obviously, with that comes think ahead. But another very important piece is take one step at a time, one achievable goal at a time. And I want to emphasize achievable. It's important to understand that you want to do an achievable goal at a time. The other thing is never say that you cannot do something because you don't know if you can or cannot. So the best solution, in my opinion, is take those opportunities that others don't want. Put yourself out there in a challenging opportunity, because if you take over a job that somebody else doesn't want, or you take over a project that failed, you only have upwards to go. And that was my motto, and that's how I succeeded. I never said no to a job, to a project, and I always looked for those that were difficult and nobody else wanted. So this is an important piece if you really want to move ahead. So I believe that if there is a will, there's definitely a way. And I said this before, if you believe that you can, you actually can. You can actually control your mind that you can. I sit through a lot of podcasts of looking for jobs and how people look for jobs, and especially older people, right? Because there's a belief that when you're older, you cannot get a job. And I sit through this podcast of very, very mature leaders that talk about it, and they all say the same thing. You have to control your own mind, and you have to believe the things that you want to believe, and then it will come. The other advice that I want to give people is it's very upsetting when a door is shut. And doors get shut. So you may be one of those people that never had a door shut, but you will have a door shut eventually. We all experience that in different aspects of our lives. And the only thing I really want to say to people in terms of an advice is when a door is shut, another one is open. And I know it's easy to say, but it's truly, truly true. And when a door is shut, things happen to you and you get upset about things and you feel certain things. And then you start going on a journey that you wouldn't have gone without it. And it takes you to a place that you wouldn't have gone without it. And you may end up in a wonderful place. And typically people do. So just to give a little example on my experience is I was very happy at AT&T. And I was told by my parents, go to a big company, a stable company, and then you grow there. And I think it was great advice. But I do feel that spending 23 years in one place was not the right thing to do, because the moment I switched, I had step function increase in my pay. I did not realize how underpaid I truly was until I changed. And as I changed jobs, I only had 4 jobs in my career because I do believe in staying in a place for a period of time to actually make sure that your impact is good. But when I changed jobs, I always had an increase in pay. And I eventually got to the point where I think I'm paid equally to my peers. So I think it's important to move around, but not very often. So I don't advise people to stay 23 years with a company, even if it's big. I think 10, 15 is good. I think 23 was a little too long. And then lastly, I would say never, ever give up. You want something, don't give up. Follow your dream.
That is wonderful advice. Juliette, I really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for making the time.
And Jody, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to do something like this. And I hope that it helps others. Please make sure that if people need support and they want to reach out, I am available. I really want to help others. I think it's really important, especially in today's environment, whether it's a female or a male or young or old. I want to be a supporter of those people that want to grow and are hardworking.
We'll put your LinkedIn profile address so people could get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out. So
wonderful. Thank you so very much, Jody.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Tech Talent Today, brought to you by Clearmont Technologies IT Staffing and Search. You can find out more at clearmonttech.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share. See you next time.